Hi, this is Nadia Jaksimbaeva, founder of Reinvention Academy and author of most recently the Chief Reinvention Officer Handbook, How to Thrive in Chaos. On today's show, we're talking about why it's no longer okay to reinvent every 10, 20, or 30 years, how you can do that with no budget in your company, and what in the heck is the kill the company exercise. Stay tuned. I'll see you at the show.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, he's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados, to another excellent episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Excellence. Thank you for joining us today. What do you need to do to up-level your leadership? Well, when you look around, it's pretty obvious that 2020 was the year that turned everyone's plans on their head. Most organizations, actually most leaders, just tried to survive, to make it through until things were, quote, back to normal. But others were prepared. In fact, they were not only surviving, they thrived. So what did they know that the rest of us probably didn't? Well, stay tuned, because that's where we're going on today's show. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. Curious to know more? Go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. This episode of Leadership and Loyalty is brought to you in part by our other podcast, Curiosity Bites. Curiosity Bites is the answer to the question, how can we bring people together who maybe completely disagree? This is exactly what your heart, your mind, your soul has been craving. It's your chance to sit in on some real and oftentimes intense conversations with some of the world's most interesting people, including astronauts, neuroscientists, philosophers, holy people, quantum physicists, skeptics, entrepreneurs, Grammy award-winning entertainers, folks you will find truly fascinating. Simply go to dovbaron.com and find out how you can sign up for and sink your teeth into the delicious Curiosity Bites. You can always find out more about either of our shows. You can find them on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. We always need your help in staying relevant, though. So please get over there, do us a favor, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. If you are a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500. And we are honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a guide to high-performing individuals and organizations, I have often spoke about my concerns regarding complacency. Too often we like to sit on our laurels and tell ourselves and anyone else who will listen how great we are, how great we've always been, and oh, how the mighty have fallen. Brands that seemed absolutely rock solid have just crumbled. Cirque du Soleil, been around for so long you can't even imagine. Chuck E. Cheese's, Neiman Marcus, Pier 1 Imports, Kohl's, The Gap, Macy's, 24-Hour Fitness, and even Virgin Australia all sunk like the Titanic. While certain companies actually boomed. Amazon, obviously. Zoom, Netflix, Pinterest, Square, DocuSign, and Apple added almost $1 trillion to its market capitalization in the past 12 months. Bottom line is the companies that thrive pivot fast, and they are masters of reinvention. In fact, Yuval Noah Harari, who is the author of Sapiens, said, forget programming. The best skills you can teach your children is reinvention. But the question is, how can you and I, how can we and our organizations reinvent and flourish? And what's more, is it still possible if you're limping out of the pandemic? Well, let's find out together, because our guest today is Dr. Nadia Jaksimbaeva. Nadia is a highly accomplished business owner, educator, speaker, and author specializing in reinvention. As a business owner, Nadia oversees groups of companies active in real estate, investment, consulting. As a consultant, she has worked with such organizations as the Coca-Cola Company, IBM, Cisco, Henkel, and many others to reinvent their products, their processes, and their leadership practices. Nadia is a member of Resourceful Advisory Board at OMV, an oil and gas company, as well as being a member of the advisory board for the Fowler Center of Business as an agent of the World Benefit at Weatherhead School of Management. She also serves on the board of Challenge that unites 35,000 members in from 242 countries and territories. Nadia has shared her insights with audiences worldwide through keynotes, panel presentations, workshops. She has delivered no less than three TEDx talks in Austria, in Slovenia, and in the US. She's the author of 3 books, Embedded Sustainability, The Next Big Competitive Advantage. Then she did Overfishing Ocean Strategies, powering up innovation for in a resource-deprived world. And then recently, as the Chief Reinvention Officer Handbook. She did the Chief Reinvention Officer Handbook, How to Thrive in Chaos. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me to welcome the reinvention guru, the queen of reinvention, Dr. Nadia.
Thank you so much, Dov. That was so much of the promise. Now I feel like I have to deliver. Thank you for this warm welcome. And my name is tough, so please do not worry about it. Zhaksimbayeva is a mouthful, so you did well.
Yeah, I made a screw up of it last time, and I practiced and everything. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure and honor to have you on the show. And I want to start here because I think it's vitally important for us. There's a lot of things that have been going on, and I think a lot of people are complacent and other people are very worried. But in the context of leadership and maybe even leadership development, what's the question that we should be looking for the answer to that most people are just not?
Mm-hmm. I think there is one. And this is the question that I've been asked during the pandemic nonstop, because as a scientist, I study large system survival. That's all I pay attention to. Why does one system survive and another fail? Whether we're talking about one career as a system, or one family, or one company, or a whole community, or the whole civilization, it really doesn't matter. At the level of the systems, they all follow about the same patterns. And since this is my research, I got asked by journalists, by my clients in business, my students in the Reinvention Academy, and it's the same question. How do we survive until things get back to normal? You just mentioned that. How do we make it until things get back to normal? And I think today, that's the wrong question. I think the number one question that we have to do or pay attention to is, what's the real question? How do we reframe it? And how do we rethink the essence of what's going on? So it's no longer about how do we survive until things get back to normal. That's what we used to do when we had relatively small number of crises. Then you could do crisis management. You could be reactive. You could tighten your belt, you can try new tricks, you can cut costs, you can do efficiency, all those things we used to do to survive a crisis. Today's question is, how do we thrive in constant volatility? And that question, not how do we survive until things get back to normal, but how do we thrive in constant volatility and uncertainty? The moment we start paying attention to that question, we discover new rules, new management tools, new leadership mindsets. We discover that it's a different way of being, and pretty much everything in our practice will change once we change that question.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up that is very interesting because, again, like I said at the beginning, I feel like people are waiting to get back to normal. I'm still seeing that. I'm still hearing people say, well, when we get back to normal. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? There is no normal. There never was, but it's never been more evident than today. So, you're trying to get back to something. History doesn't move backwards, it moves forwards.
Mhm.
So you got to look at what's next. And I see this as a challenge. Are you facing that? I mean, you're the reinvention guru. People are coming to you for reinvention, but there's an interesting psychological position, which is my understanding, right? Which is one of my quotes is everybody wants change as long as they don't have to. Right. So
Yes.
they want to reinvent. They love the idea of a reinvention. Oh, this is a cool thing. We should get on board with this. But now you got to implement it. Oh, well, we're doing good. We're fine. I have friends who are consultants who are paid $75K or $100K to go in to give their strategy so that they can ignore it and that the company can then brag about how they brought the person in and didn't happen. So do they come to you in two categories? Oh, they're genuinely enthusiastic about reinvention, or do they come to you also in the category of we should do this, but we're probably not going to do it?
Well, to answer that question, we have to back up a little bit and figure out why we are in this state.
Yes.
When we are born reinventors. Unless there is a horrible health tragedy, no baby is laying there and says, no, I'm just not interested in eating solids, just not my thing, or not gonna walk, I'm not made for it, it's not my passion, not gonna walk, or give me a bonus and then I'll start crawling. Just doesn't happen. We are wired to reinvent. It's our natural makeup, and this is built into us. But we are educated out of it. And the question is why? It's not anything crazy conspiracies. Nobody is here to control us and push us down. It's just a catch-up, playing catch-up. Humanity is playing catch-up. You have to understand that for about 200 plus years, since the modern capitalist world was born and the modern industrial economy was born, we are in post-industrial age, but we are still living on the tail end of that.
In the halo of that.
Yeah, sure. We're living in that. When that was born, that was the time of very, very stable, slow change. Mm-hmm. The statistics are very, very telling here. The average business model would last for about 75 years up until the end of last century, just 25 years ago. That was still the case. 75 years, you can milk the same cow. If that is the case, we have to educate people who can do the same thing for 30, 40 years of their career because they will retire and never see a reinvention. We have to develop tools, things like budgeting, traditional strategic planning, just-in-time inventory management, traditional budget, I already mentioned budgeting, traditional approaches to talent development. All of those tools and skills and operating systems were created for that era. Mm-hmm. It worked. It was good. It was nothing to control or put people down. The problem is that we started entering a whole new era. And just around late 80s, early 90s, it went from 75 to about 15. And then now we finished this research in September 2020, and the respondents in 2020 said 60% of companies are reinventing every 3 years or less to survive. That's your competitors, that's your customers, that's your suppliers, that's your world. So from 75 to 3, that's a whole different ballgame.
Absolutely.
And we're not catching up. We're still trying to fit the old tools and the new reality, like that square peg in the round hole, and wondering why it's not working. It's not meant to work for the new world, and our own mindset is not yet catching up. So what we have to do, we have to reload. We have to reframe the mindset and then work with the tool set and the skill set to make this all work.
That makes sense to me. The obvious pushback is, well, if that's the case, where is our foundation? Aren't we always just then having to reinvent, and we never actually move forward because we're always like we're retooling and reinventing every 10 minutes? When do we actually get to be operational and make some money here?
I love that question. Well, that's the essence of what reinvention is. It's balancing two things, change and continuity. And that's the dance of reinvention. Why, for example, as everyone have a big love affair with the word innovation, but innovation is only one of 9 different types of reinventions. And some of them are very small incremental changes, and some are in the middle, and some are really in the innovation department. But the essence of reinvention is managing continuity and change, slowing down and really solidifying certain things versus blowing things up. Both sides are equally important, and both sides have to be respected. Traditionally, there's two worlds, one that blows things up and one that organizes it, brings in efficiency, standard operating procedures, and all of that. Those two sides traditionally hated each other. And for most companies, the blow up happened either in the boardroom or by those consultants who were outsourced. The blow up was outsourced. And then the rest of the company was just managing the second part of the cycle, where we are taking the complexity and organizing it into simplicity and order. And in that area, we usually see operations managers, line managers, accountants, financiers, supply chain managers. On the left side, we usually see marketing people, sales people, strategy people, and of course, everyone in innovation and development stage. And those two camps hate each other. We have to change that as well. We have to recognize the essential need for both and build processes that allow us to pass the baton when it's necessary. So continuity and change both have to be respected. And we have to find a different way to manage our companies to allow for that heartbeat to move it forward.
Yeah, I can see, the eyes glazing over at the possibility of having to do all that, but you've laid it out in a way that makes it, I don't know if the word is consumable, but it's bite size at a time, because I think that the whole idea as a concept, reinvention seems massive. Right.
It does.
And people are, psychologically, human beings will hold on to what's familiar. We're very good at holding on to what's familiar, even if it sucks. You cited in your book the story of blockbusters being offered an opportunity to be part of Netflix and sort of laughing them out of the office because they were sticking with what, quote, worked, but it was a past tense. And they were offered, they had a chance to buy out Netflix for a very cheap amount of money, comparatively speaking today. So it's like that psychological desire to hold on. And then there are a few people, and I do think a few are rare people who are going, no, we're going to burn it down. We're going to restart. We're going to do it all. But you can't burn it down every 10 minutes, and you've got to have something that is foundational. You've put together the Reinvention Academy. So I want to go into this a little bit because I want people to grasp this. Is that a place for CEOs? Is that a place for owners, as in founders of maybe a multi-generational family business? Or is this an entrepreneurial endeavor where, I'm coming along and I go, oh, I'd like to sell books on Amazon or stuff on Amazon?
Oh, I love that question. So Reinvention Academy originally was born because when we built our consulting company in 2007, we were working with massive corporations. And originally it was born for corporate world because in 2014, we couldn't accept new clients. We were out of capacity. And our clients, the corporate world, were the ones who said, if you cannot come, can you teach us? And we started developing tools, doing massive amount of research and really building this new management theory we call reinvention. But in time, what naturally happened is that we got 2 other groups mixed in. And now this diversity is what makes our community so strong. We have still corporate leaders and middle managers as well, but we also have amazing external consultants, coaches, trainers. And we also have business owners. Some of them, I was just hosting an event with one of our graduates who lost her massive multi-million-dollar business in retail right before COVID-19. And she was sharing that story, and she's building a different company now. So we have quite a lot of business owners in a kind of traditional brick and mortar type of business who are also there. So this mix is what allows us to see very different perspectives and transfer and cross-pollinate with ideas. But the most important thing I want to come back to is this issue that reinvention is massive and difficult. Let me reframe that. There's a difference between what I call reinvention 1.0 and reinvention 2.0.
Okay.
Reinvention 1.0 is the way we looked at reinvention in the 20th century, when things were relatively slow, where we would build a company and milk it for 20, 30 years, where the disruption would come once every 40, 50 years. We all remember those disruptions. In the 20th century, maybe Great Depression in the US and in North America, maybe Greater Depression, perhaps Second World War, a little bit significantly less than in Europe. Maybe people remember the oil crisis of the 70s. There's really not much. You can name them under, it's one hand that you can name the major disruptions. So reinvention 1.0 is this massive one-time thing I do to my company for the next 75 years to be a coasting time.
You're kind of an innovative company if you do it every 20, 25 years back in that time.
Exactly. And it's this massive effort. We redo everything. We rethink our product portfolio, branding, our business model, everything. It's this massive thing. That's reinvention 1.0.
Yeah.
Invention in this context is a project that happens rarely. And after it's done, we are in a coastal zone. Today, because of the uncertainty levels, because of the complexity and the exponential age in which we live, where everything moves so much faster because of confluence of technology, geopolitics, population growth, and so many other things, those times are gone. Today, in this time, reinvention cannot be a project. It has to become a process. It has to become not like this one thing we do every 75 years, but has to become like taking a shower. If I don't take a shower on a regular basis, I begin to stink. If my company doesn't take a shower on a regular basis, if my products don't take a shower on a regular basis, if my processes are not upgraded on a regular basis, they begin to stink. So shower is not a massive event in my life. I have a process, I have raw materials, I have a competence. My daughter is 17. I remember the time she didn't know how to take a shower. You build the competence. There's still a learning curve. So, but you have the skills, you have the tools, you have resources, you have the process. That's what's happening with Reinvention 2.0. And that's what Reinvention Academy is all about, helping different industries figure out for themselves what their process should look like. Just like finance is now a process, marketing is a process, manufacturing is a process, reinvention has to become a process.
So we've got to get out of the mindset that it's this project we're going to go into for the next year or 2 years, but it's an ongoing process that we are always doing. So this rule of this is how we do it has to be under constant question, has to constantly be re-examined. And I've written about this in the past, where I wrote about how best practices are dangerous, right? And so it's that same thing. Is that 100%. Am I right?
100%.
Right.
100%.
So best practices were best. They're history, right? They're not best anymore. What's the best practice tomorrow, even if today's is? Because one of the challenges that, as a consultant, when I go into companies and they're, well, you're looking to break something that's not broken. And I'm going, yeah, I want to break it before someone else breaks it, because they, being the market, will break it and you will be left on your ass. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And now COVID is the great example of that. We had a pandemic, and in 21 days, companies that were absolutely against remote transformed and became remote. And I think that there's no greater applause for what you're doing than actually the pandemic. Because you and I had a conversation before, you were on the show before, and it was, in the boom before the pandemic and everything was great. And you were talking about reinvention. And I'm sure some people were like, yeah, whatever, everything's great. Yeah, we're not changing. And then the iceberg, as you would term it, comes out of nowhere. You're sailing through in the night. Everything's great. You're out on the decks and you're dancing. And the iceberg comes up and tears a big hole in you. It's called 2020. And now you've got a pandemic and you don't have the people in the office and you haven't got the systems in place, and massive organizations got sunk. Mm-hmm. But, and I want to come to this in the second part, but I want to talk about this because it's important, this resistance, because that was then. Now, you don't understand. We're not going to get into the pandemic. I got double vaccinated. My family got double vaccinated. My customer got double vaccinated. We're all good. It's going to be fine. And it is, but it's not. It's going to change. It's going to evolve. It's not going to be what it was, but it'll be something else. That, I want to talk about that. How do you shake people out of that feeling of, oh, well, I just want to stay cozy, So that's where we're going to go in part 2 of the show. We're going to look at that. We're going to look at how you can begin to organize yourself in a way that makes sure you don't become the next Titanic. And we're going to talk about the art of leadership from a place of reinvention. How do you reinvent at a leadership level? We're going to be back with our wonderful guest for our delicious conversation with the queen of reinvention. Before we take the break, Nadia, would you please tell our viewers and our listeners where they can find out more about you and all your wonderful resources? And by the way, I do encourage you to grab Nadia's books. They're also very beautiful. They're interactive. They're not your usual book. So please tell us more.
Thank you so much. So we would be happy to have you on learntoreinvent.com. 2 is a numerical there. So that's LEARN2 reinvent.com. And you will find a whole bunch of resources there. You can download the book. You can get the set of business model reinvention cards right there on the same page, and other resources we'll offer. Whether you are in corporate, entrepreneurial, consulting setting, we have something for everyone.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. We're going to be back in just a little while, just one click away, dear listener. If you want to continue to join us, now forget if you do. You absolutely want to join us for the second part of this fabulous conversation with the queen of reinvention, the mother of reinvention. So stay with us. Remember, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious. We're just one click away from part 2.